employee engagement, as I like to say, is a logical and emotional choice. Yep. And middle managers have the ability to help the change make sense for people and help connect it to their work. And organizational change is the aggregation of individual change. And middle managers, because of their sheer volume, have a wider reach or further reach than executive leaders can in order to make that possible.
Welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I explore the intricate layers of organizational change alongside insightful professionals. I am Ali Jima, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Nicole Gahagan, an author, a high-performing strategist, and organizational change expert committed to improving employee experience and organizational effectiveness. With her vast experience, Nicole has honed a distinctive method for fostering change, renowned for forging relationships, achieving agreement, and inspiring various groups of stakeholders. She reliably delivers significant results. In this episode, we will dive into the pivotal role of middle management, which Nicole aptly calls the linchpin in managing change. We will explore how middle managers enable their teams to adopt change. We'll discuss the critical influence they have in driving successful adoption or potentially hampering it, and the strategies they can use to enable their teams. Additionally, we'll examine how middle managers can act as effective change agents, leveraging their unique position to ensure alignment and cohesion throughout the organization. I'm grateful to have Nicole chatting with me today. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast. I'm eternally grateful for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I feel like this is going to be a conversation with an old friend. I listen to your podcast often.
Thank you so much. Today, Nicole, we're going to talk about change in the higher education, but maybe we'll double click on the topic of middle management. Within those organizations, very unique industry. But before we start, it will be fantastic, Nicole, to introduce yourself to my audience.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Nicole Gahagan. I am a practitioner, author, speaker, trainer, and consultant of basically all things related to organizational change in college and university settings. Effective transformational changes have really been a hallmark of my career, which has spanned over 20 years so far in both private and public institutions, 2-year and 4-year institutions. And I've had the honor of facilitating a number of large-scale efforts that help to improve cultural, structural, and operational conditions that measurably improve the student and employee experience. I spent about half of my higher education career in middle management and the other half in senior management. And it was actually during my experience as a chief student success officer that I became really intrigued by the change agent potential that I feel like is packed into the middle level leadership ranks. I was about midway through a 3-year transformational change project when I realized my executive level change leadership was a lot less vital and relevant to the successful operationalization of the change initiative than compared to my middle management folks like our associate deans and directors. And so this intrigue ultimately led to my doctoral research about how mid-level managers make sense of and subsequently enact their role in the context of organizational change. And, my interest and my expertise in organizational change spans beyond that critical role, but it's often what I help executive leaders understand in terms of how they can structure and support those mid-level leaders.
Who would you classify as a middle manager in a university?
Yeah, I keep that definition really broad because change is really context dependent, and so are how people define their roles within the context of organizational change. So essentially, I'm thinking about anybody between what we would consider the executive cabinet and frontline employees. So anybody who falls within that range.
Anybody that can translate decisions into actions.
100%. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a very vital group within an organization by sheer responsibility and influence. It sounds like you were a middle manager at some stage. At a higher level, how do you see this segment of the university? How do they manage change currently? Is it the best way, or do they need to understand their role in the context of change?
Yeah. In my opinion, middle managers are the linchpin between strategy and operations. They have the responsibility of translating a high-level vision into ground-level reality, and they often do that without a lot of guidance and support. And transformational change really demands coherent and shared understandings across the organization in order to enable those cohesive actions collectively aligned across the objectives of the strategic initiative. And I think because of their network centrality, right, their hierarchical and relational positions within organizations, middle managers can really be leveraged, their positionality as well as their multidimensional relationships to be especially helpful in achieving organizational change and democratizing that change as well, so it doesn't feel so top-down.
I'm always keen to understand how organizations can help build that change capability within the middle management group. I've seen attempts at making it like a formal course, and I've seen attempts that get the middle management to lead the projects with the support of the project groups, and that's the indirect way to help them build that capability. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think the worst thing an organization can do is allow for middle managers to navigate the complexity of academic culture and governance structures haphazardly and without direction and support. I think leaving the result up to that type of change leadership offers a lot of maybe divergence from the intended outcomes and could cause more harm than good in terms of change saturation and initiative fatigue that especially frontline employees might end up feeling. I think, unfortunately, that's often the case. Middle managers typically don't understand and aren't given directives in terms of what their role should be in the context of change. And I think that that's senior management's responsibility to help structure and support that change through creating the right environment, attending to that individual as a middle manager, as well as attending to the relationships and the intentionality with which they help to structure the relationship building that middle managers engage in.
One of the best examples that I've seen, you would know this, that when we manage a change within an organization, some organizations opt to completely get a project group outside the business operation to run the project, and the middle management will be receiving that change and with the ambition that they will sustain it after the project finishes. But one of the best examples that I've seen in my own experience is that I did work on a project where we needed to manage a very critical piece within a university. The structure was different. The structure was led by the middle managers, 3 of them, and we were the support, and we were the guidance, and we were the advisors. Is this how you see support happening for these and that you talked about?
Yeah, I think that the model that you described would be an ideal version of how middle managers' change agency is activated. I think, like I mentioned, they have the technical expertise to understand what has to happen operationally to sustain a change, and they also have the relationships to help anticipate what some of the thoughts and feelings might be about a change, the thoughts and feelings of their direct reports, maybe other frontline employees, and even those thoughts and feelings of their peers, because of, again, where they're positioned within the organization. And so if their input is garnered and their ability to enable their network in a way that casts the breadth and depth of a change process, I think institutions are more likely to achieve their intended outcomes, because employee engagement, as I like to say, is a logical and emotional choice. Yep. And middle managers have the ability to help the change make sense for people and help connect it to their work. And organizational change is the aggregation of individual change. And middle managers, because of their sheer volume, have a wider reach or further reach than executive leaders can in order to make that possible.
I'm going to share my thought with you around the change experience. So I do focus on, in my own practice, around the notion of change experience and creating a positive change experience for the employees. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the enablers for employee engagement, because only through a positive change experience, a staff member can feel that, okay, well, the change has been communicated to me, they understood my needs, they trained me, they supported me, and then they listened to my concerns. And there's always an avenue for me to seek help. And so that's usually the pathway for a positive change experience. Unfortunately, sometimes in a world where the middle manager is overwhelmed with the usual responsibilities of a middle manager, it's almost like you've got two types of operational managers. Let's just call them operational managers. Some of them think that the project is a disruption to their operation,
right?
And therefore they say to you, "Okay, Nicole, you want to roll out this change? Yep, that's fine. I'm available. Do this. Invite my team," and all of that. So they kind of stand on the sideline when a change happens. And my advice has always been, on the contrary, you need to be interested in what I am talking to your team about, because that is going to impact the experience, and the dynamics may change as well. So it's in your best interest to be interested. Not only that, my advice to managers that I work with is that you know your team really well, more than me. You would need to dictate almost that type of change management that needs to happen. So it's in your best interest to know why I've chosen this particular change plan, and on what basis, and what's my evidence, and what's the strategy. So then it's going to align with, good, this plan is going to work for my team. Is my head too high up in the clouds that I'm not a realist about this, or is this how it should really happen?
Yeah, I think, right, eventually a change manager who's a sole contributor that dips in and out of projects as the change initiatives dictate is eventually going to leave, and it's up to that middle manager to sustain that change. And they're aware of the aspects that the change impacts, right? And the aspects of those change in terms of systems and processes and job roles and reporting structures, compensation, all those types of things that help to live the change beyond the change process proper, right? And so sometimes I find middle managers, when they have the luxury of having a change manager come in, do become dependent on that individual and make assumptions that folks will just continue to carry out that change on a daily basis and embed it into their operations. But those frontline employees need the consistent support of their middle managers, because change events don't happen in isolation anymore, right? We're oftentimes managing multiple changes simultaneously. And so it's almost like the person in the circus who's keeping all the plates spinning. And I feel like that's where the middle manager comes in. They have to keep all of those plates spinning for their folks to help provide that direction, that guidance, and that consistency in the change process, as well as helping to keep the lights on and manage those operational and sometimes especially urgent tasks and responsibilities as well.
You used the metaphor of a linchpin. How do you keep a linchpin in place? Because if it's out of place, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that the middle managers as the linchpin, you can keep them in place if you show them that you value their work and that you reward it in a number of different ways, including just generally recognition. Hearing their voice and validating it through the decision-making process and through leadership actions that especially senior managers might take. One of the recommendations that I often make for organizations is that they articulate the expectations for middle managers that change leadership is going to be part of their job. So that way it is a known factor when coming into that role, and those individuals electing to come into the middle level ranks have an opportunity to consider whether or not managing change is something they want to do, and can also compare it to their knowledge and skill sets, right? So they can come into that role making an informed choice. And those middle managers will also, of course, benefit from the training and things like you had mentioned. But I also think it's critical that senior level managers create an atmosphere where the organization can be ready for change, and that senior managers sponsor changes in ways that validate mid-level leaders' change-related actions as well. I feel like that type of both explicit and implicit support and recognition of a mid-levels change agency is really critical to keep that linchpin in place so that they don't become frustrated and decide to leave.
I've never seen an organization that's always ready for change. So I think that's when they rely heavily on the middle management to cushion those decisions and make them happen. I want to shift gear and I want to talk to you about, I want to ask you about, do you think the nature of the role of the middle manager in a higher education setting different from a normal organization, fully fledged for-profit organization?
It might be, in that institutions of higher education are complex, and middle managers in colleges and universities are often navigating and negotiating the needs and expectations of multiple stakeholder groups that span both like their direct reports, students, colleagues, their supervisors, sometimes external funding agencies, state, federal government, and in the surrounding community, public opinion, right? All of these stakeholder groups that oftentimes have competing demands. And so I think that's what makes middle management and trying to lead change in a human-centered approach challenging for those middle managers in this environment.
Yeah, you did talk about change impact. I strongly believe that one of the best ways we can help middle managers manage a change is actually explain to them not only the first level of impact, but even the second and potentially the third if we are experienced enough. Because only by explaining the change impact, you can alert them to what they need to do and what decisions need to happen. Have I got this close to right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I help walk middle managers through within my organization, or things that I suggest during the trainings that I offer, is to develop like a stakeholder perspectives map and try to anticipate what's important to those various stakeholders and what that impact on them might be. And then to develop their strategic narrative about the change, addressing genuinely, of course, what those impacts are and what those needs and expectations of those various stakeholder groups might be. Yeah.
Let's go to the topic of AI. You would have, I'm pretty sure you'd have seen a lot of the hype around it nowadays. And from personal experience, I'm actually loving the potential of the technology. Let's talk about that. First of all, what do you think of the technology? And the second thing is, do you really think that the future of work, because I do believe that there's going to be an impact on the way we run our operations, do we need to reimagine the role of a middle manager within an organization, let alone higher education. But let's start with the technology question. What do you think of especially generative AI?
Yeah. Well, I think it could be incredibly helpful. I think that it can save us a lot of time. It can serve as like our research assistant in a lot of ways, and help to cut through some of just the volume of information that is out there, right? So it can point you in the right direction more quickly than a human might be able to do it, for example. Another way that I've seen it used is through helping to analyze large sets of quantitative and qualitative data. It can help you get the same results, but in a much shorter amount of time, so that you can move forward with making data-informed decisions and move forward with focusing more on the human side of change, because you're not bogged down with data collection and analysis. I feel like AI can help do that for you.
Yes. How do you use it, person? Do you use AI at all?
I do use AI. I use it in all the ways that I just mentioned. So I was tapping into my own personal experience. And a lot of the change projects that I help to lead focus on improving the student and employee experience. And especially in terms of the student experience, I think there's a lot of opportunity to cut out some of the more transactional work that happens with students, so that individuals can focus on the human connections that are really, really critical to student success. So staff can cut out some of those more administrative tasks. I think AI can really help with that. So again, they can focus on more meaningful work.
I've been testing a lot of things around generative AI myself, including Copilot and ChatGPT, obviously. I started when ChatGPT started. You were right. Maybe about 3-4 years ago, I actually thought of hiring somebody to help me with putting packs together, and the content is mine, but I just need somebody to do that so I can service more clients. Well, I procrastinated on the idea to get somebody else because I thought I'm going to have to explain my thought process to somebody else, and that will be time consuming, so I might as well do it. Thank you, universe sent me AI to actually do that, probably more cost-effective way and faster. I think it's still early in the stage, but the potential is amazing. One of the first things that I used AI for, generative AI, is to help me ask good questions in my podcast interviews. So I've got an idea, and I've got quite a few things to talk about. So it helps me with that. But you're right. I mean, like yesterday, I put a paper together, and then I wanted Copilot to give me what sentiment will the reader walk away with from this.
Right.
You know, it gives you ideas. I mean, are they close to real? Probably not, but at least it's like your coach on the side. So I'm not scared of the technology, and even started to make me think about my own role. And about the future in 10 years, 5 years and 10 years, what my role will actually be. This notion in my head that AI will be part of the tools and the way we do work in a university, especially in higher education, because the focus on use cases predominantly now is on the higher education, and rightly so. Do you think that will impact the role of the middle manager? They need to play as an advocate, as a mobilizer, as a coach, as a prompter?
Yeah, I think the middle manager has a lot of opportunity to help others adopt AI. Some individuals are afraid of it, as of course you know. Yeah. Some individuals think that maybe AI might replace their jobs. And I think that the middle manager can help to open individuals' eyes to what is possible should an AI mechanism come into place to help gain some skills of efficiency in terms of their work, right? One of the largest complaints in higher education settings, probably everywhere, is that there's not enough time, right? I don't have enough capacity to manage all the things that are on my plate. And AI can take some of that off. And there still can be a human validating what AI produces, but that takes just a fraction of the time it would take a human to create whatever data or take care of whatever administrative task that AI just accomplished.
Yeah, the human is always going to be in the middle somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in a human enterprise like higher education.
Yes. I do think that they, well, first of all, they would need to understand the technology and the potential.
Mm-hmm.
So if a middle manager now probably listening to this podcast and then haven't played with generative AI, they haven't touched it, and they're probably behind already. And the technology is happening. I think one of the pieces of evidence for me that every time there's a new technology, there's always, will this work? The biggest thing, nobody's saying that about generative AI and AI. We know it will work. We know the potential. It just, we're grappling with how can we adopt it? Where do we start? And my advice is that whilst your organization is thinking around strategy and all of that, especially in higher education, have a go. Have a go and play and have a play, because only through play you will understand the potential. But burying somebody's head in the sand is not going to be the solution, because if you're in a role of responsibility, you're responsible and accountable for what your team is going to adopt later. And you'd better really understand what that looks like for your job. And the other thing is that it's an amazing technology where, as you mentioned, it will help us focus on the value we add rather than the non-value work that sometimes we need to do. So a piece of analysis, we've got, let's just say you've got a lot of information. It'll take you 2 weeks to analyze, usually with number of hours and cost. AI may not be 100%, but that 50% will actually cut your time by half. And then, because you still need to, as you mentioned, the humans still need to scrutinize it, because that's your piece. But I always say, some people say, oh, it's almost like cheating. And I always say, well, Excel works out all of your formulas and pivot tables. You wouldn't call that cheating, would you? That is an AI. It was already happening. It's just a matter of now it's becoming more intelligent. And what's your take on, is not just the middle managers, the senior managers in a higher education would need really to adopt it and understand it as well. Is that your take as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're the individuals who have to set the use of AI as a strategic priority and also allocate the resources that would enable the rest of the organization to explore and experiment and eventually adopt those technologies.
Yep. I want to ask you a cheeky question around middle managers while I'm thinking about this. Who would not be suitable to be a middle manager in a higher education?
I would say somebody who doesn't like people and doesn't like problem solving, because I feel like that is the majority of their work. Yeah. So you talk about problem solving. That is a capability by itself, right? Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
and with the volatility of, because middle managers, what's the attrition rate? Is there a lot of movement around this level of managers in higher education or not?
Yes, there absolutely is. And I think that has to do with a number of factors. Some of it is folks feel like it's a thankless job. It's often overlooked and undervalued in both day-to-day operations as well as strategic change, and the opportunity for middle managers to be really effective change agents. Sometimes I think they feel circumvented, and they're then often viewed as change saboteurs or change resistors, when that's not the case. Oftentimes it's what looks like obstructionist behavior might be the manifestations of role ambiguity or even advocacy for their departments and their team members.
Is that because there's a level of hierarchy in the higher education? Researchers and academics, they're usually up there. But I always think that the student should be up there. But because that's what we actually work for. I think I agree with you. You just made me think around this thankless feeling, and because sometimes I do see them tiptoeing around change, creating, worrying about how the change will be accepted by the academics and the researchers. And for me, the researchers in the academics, just like another segment of customers, they're going to have to engage with. So you talked about the phenomena of, if you're in the business of management and leadership, you come to work every day for one reason. This is how I see the world anyway, Nicole. And I might be, most of the time I'm wrong, but a manager will come to work every day with a single task, which is helping their people succeed. So it's not really doing the timesheets and all of that. These are all tasks that they need to do, but that's not their real job. How they make their people succeed is by making decisions. Those decisions become actions, and actions are changes. And therefore, it's in their best interest to be so good at managing change and being influencers. Have I got this? Have I got this right?
Yeah, absolutely you do. And I think middle managers often underestimate their ability to be a good change manager, right? One of the things that I always suggest middle managers do is think about a change process that they've been a part of. What went well, what felt like it was missing? And then what does that tell you about what others might need from you as an individual who is managing change, whether you call it that or not?
Yes. Sometimes you do come across middle managers that stuck with one idea about their operation. And we always say to them, when a change is introduced to any team, that knowledge is good, but it may be a different, the change will impact the dynamics of a team differently. And therefore, we ask them to be slightly open to new ideas about how they change. But you were right. I had a conversation 2 weeks ago where somebody said, I've got a change, and a manager, middle manager, probably more than a middle manager. And these are the steps that I followed. These are the things that I did for the team. And I said, exactly what you're doing is change management. You are on the right track. You don't need a degree to be a good change manager. Sometimes you're experienced, you're in the middle, you're in the arena, you're in the middle of the action. You know what works, what doesn't work. Nobody needs to tell you that you need to communicate with your team. You do need to communicate with your team. That's your job. You may not have a communication plan, but whatever you've got can work. And so sometimes a lack of structure may not help, but that's not going to break the whole strategy for you. So my advice is always have a go. You can seek advice to validate, but have a go yourself, because through having a go, you will learn a lot about yourself, and you will learn a lot about your team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think have a go and welcome the feedback from the individuals who you are leading change for. Oftentimes they'll tell you what's working for them and what's not. Yep. And then you can iterate your change leadership approach based on that feedback.
Yeah, fantastic. We are, I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. We're coming close to the end of the podcast, Nicole, talking about the middle managers. I want to ask you a question around what is the advice that people like myself and the changing comms would need to understand about this particular layer of management?
Yeah, I think that it's critical to understand that when a middle manager is receiving a change directive, which is usually the dynamic in a higher education environment, they've got 4 things that they need to do before they can be an effective change agent. They have to make sense of the change itself, understand why the initiative is being charged in the first place, what the intended outcomes are. Then they need to understand how that's going to impact their role as a change manager and what the expectations are for them in terms of carrying out that change, how it's going to impact their team, and how they are going to also continue managing the operational daily tasks that's required of them as well. So paying attention to those 4 key responsibilities of a middle manager in the context of organizational change will help to provide the structure and support for those individuals so that they can be your partner in the change process.
Fantastic. Making sense of change, that is a big task, but we certainly can help with that. But totally agree with you. I think part of our job is to understand their own challenges, the context of the play, the game they're actually playing, because there's a lot of things moving at the same time. And I'll give you an example. Recently, I worked with a manager who's just joined the team from within the organization, but from a different team. But even that is a context. So I explained to them that your team is going through multiple changes. The first change is that their leader has changed. And that's a huge change that they need to really understand and comprehend. And then on top of that, in your first week, we are bringing you a new huge change to your system as well. So painting the picture around the playing conditions around that really helps the middle managers. And the majority of them, I find, appreciate this insight as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Nicole. How would people reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is via LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find because of the uniqueness of my surname. So it's Nicole Gahagan, EDD. And I post a lot of content there, definitely about the middle manager role in organizational change, as well as organizational change leadership in general.
Fantastic. We're going to put all your information in the podcast, Nicole.
Great.
It's been a pleasure having you in my podcast, The Inner Game of Change. I hope to have you back at some stage in the future. We can talk about middle managers, but from a different perspective. But until then, stay well and stay safe. And thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode valuable, remember to subscribe to stay updated on upcoming episodes. Your support is truly appreciated. And by sharing this podcast with your colleagues, friends, and fellow change practitioners, it can help me reach even more individuals and professionals who can benefit from these discussions. Remember, and in my opinion, change is an enduring force, and you will only have a measure of certainty and control when you embrace it. Until next time, thank you for being part of the Inner Game of Change community. I am Ali Jama, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast.
That was good. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
I really enjoyed the flow of it, so that was nice.
Good.